Rain lashed through the thornwood forest like a punishment from the gods themselves. Elowyn ran. Branches clawed at her arms, tore at her ceremonial dress, the pale silver gown she'd spent 3 months weaving with her own hands. Thread by thread, dream by dream, now it hung in tatters, soaked through, clinging to her skin like a shroud. Rejected, the word echoed through her skull with every footfall, every ragged breath. She could still hear the gasps of the pack behind her, could still see Aldrich's face, the man she'd loved since childhood, the alpha heir she'd been promised to since her 16th summer, as he'd stood before the entire Ashford pack and spoken the words that shattered her world. I, Aldrich of Ashford, reject Elowyn as my fated mate. She is unworthy of standing beside an alpha. Her wolf is defective, her bloodline is tainted. I claim Venetia of the Eastern Reach as my chosen bride. Unworthy, defective, tainted. Elowyn's foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, catching herself against a tree trunk. Her palms scraped against rough bark, and she welcomed the sting. Physical pain was easier than the hollow cavity where her heart used to be. Her wolf, already weak from years of suppression under Ashford's rigid hierarchy, had gone completely silent the moment Aldrich spoke. Not whimpering, not howling in grief, just gone, as if the rejection had killed the last ember of her spirit. Get up, she told herself. Keep moving. If they find you. She didn't finish the thought. She knew what happened to rejected Omegas in traditional packs. At best, a life of servitude. At worst, exile into unclaimed territory where rogues hunted anything with a pulse. Elowyn pushed off the tree and ran again. The forest grew denser, darker. She'd crossed into unfamiliar territory now, somewhere beyond Ashford's borders, where the ancient trees grew so thick their canopies blocked out the storm-darkened sky. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed for rest. But she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Not until she was far enough away that she could disappear forever. She burst through a wall of undergrowth into a small clearing and collided directly with something solid, warm, and immovable. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She would have fallen backward if not for the hands that shot out to catch her, gripping her upper arms with startling strength. For a moment, Elowyn could only gasp, her vision swimming. Rain streamed down her face, and she blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the figure before her. He was tall. That was her first coherent thought. Tall in a way that made her feel impossibly small, her head barely reaching his chest. Broad shoulders blocked out what little light filtered through the trees, and his hands on her arms large, calloused. Radiating heat that cut through the freezing rain held her as if she weighed nothing at all. Please, she choked out, still not seeing his face clearly. Please, I didn't mean to. I'll go. I'll leave your territory. I just need to be still. 2 words. Just 2 words, spoken in a voice like distant thunder, low and resonant and threaded with an authority that made her wolf her silent, broken wolf suddenly stir. Elowyn froze. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. The face that met hers was carved from shadow and firelight. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, a mouth set in a hard line. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from her lungs all over again. They were the color of molten amber, burning with an inner light that no ordinary wolf possessed, and they were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "What is your name?" he asked. Not a request, a command. Elowyn, she whispered. Something flickered in those burning eyes. His grip on her arms didn't loosen. "You're injured," he said, his gaze dropping to the scratches on her arms, the blood mixing with rain on her torn skin. "And you reek of another male's scent." His jaw tightened visibly. "Who did this to you?" "No one. I fell. I was running. The words tangled in her throat. Why was she explaining herself to a stranger? Why couldn't she move? "You were running from something. It wasn't a question. Or someone." Elowyn tried to pull back, but his hands held firm. Not painfully, just absolutely. As if releasing her wasn't an option he was willing to consider. "Please," she tried again. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just passing through. I'll leave your territory and you'll never see me again. I swear." "No." The word hung in the rain-soaked air between them. Elowyn blinked. "What?" "You're not going anywhere." Her heart stuttered. I don't understand." The stranger's amber eyes bore into hers, and she saw something shift in their depths. Something ancient and possessive and utterly unshakable. "Neither do I," he murmured, almost to himself. "But you're not leaving." Before she could respond, voices echoed through the forest behind them. Shouts, the crash of boots through undergrowth, someone calling her name with cruel amusement. "Elowyn! Little Omega! Where are you running to? There's nowhere for a rejected wolf to go. Aldrich's hunting party. They'd followed her. Terror seized her. Please, she gasped. Please, you have to let me go. If they find me. The stranger's expression had changed. The intensity was still there, but now it was joined by something colder, something dangerous. Who is pursuing you? He asked, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet. My former pack, Ashford. I was rejected, and they… Her voice broke. Please, they'll drag me back. They'll make me a servant, or worse. I can't. The shouts grew closer. The stranger released her arms, and for one horrifying moment, Elwyn thought he was going to hand her over, step aside and let Aldrich's wolves claim her. Instead, he moved in front of her. His body became a wall between her and the approaching threat, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the forest with a power that made the very trees seem to tremble. Anyone who steps into this clearing dies. Silence fell. The crashing footsteps stopped, and then a voice she knew all too well rang out, dripping with false bravado. Who dares threaten wolves of the Ashford pack? Identify yourself. The stranger didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I am Kaelin, and you are standing on sovereign ground of the Valdris Kingdom. The blood drained from Elwyn's face. Kaelin, the Kaelin, Alpha King of Valdris, ruler of the 7 packs, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, a male whose name was spoken in whispers, whose armies had never lost a battle, whose mere presence was said to make lesser alphas bare their throats in submission. She had crashed directly into the Alpha King. A long pause followed his words. Then Aldrich's voice came again, stripped of its arrogance, now thin with barely concealed fear. Forgive us, Your Majesty. We meant no disrespect. We're simply retrieving what belongs to us. The Omega girl, she's property of Ashford pack. Elwyn's stomach turned. Property. Kaelin turned his head slightly, just enough that she caught the edge of his profile. When he spoke, his voice was ice. This female stands under my protection. She belongs to no one but herself. Leave now, or I will consider your presence here an act of war. Another pause. Longer this time, then footsteps retreating rapidly, crashing back through the undergrowth, running away. Elwyn stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The most powerful alpha in the realm had just threatened war over her. A rejected Omega, a nobody. Kaelin turned back to face her fully, and those amber eyes softened by the smallest fraction. You're safe now, he said. Elwyn wanted to thank him, wanted to ask why, wanted to understand what possible reason the Alpha King could have for protecting a stranger he'd known for all of 2 minutes. But her legs had finally given out, the trauma and exhaustion crashing over her at once. The world tilted. The last thing she saw was Kaelin reaching for her, his strong arms catching her before she hit the ground. And then there was only darkness. Elwyn woke to warmth. That was wrong. She knew it was wrong before she even opened her eyes. She should be cold, should be soaked and shivering on the forest floor, or worse, dragged back to Ashford in chains. Instead, she lay on something soft, softer than anything she'd ever felt. The scent of cedar and wood smoke wrapped around her, underlaid with something else, something wild and masculine that made her wolf stir with recognition. Mate. The word drifted up from deep within her, and Elwyn's eyes snapped open. She was in a bed. An enormous bed draped in furs and linens dyed the deep blue of midnight. Stone walls rose around her, hung with tapestries depicting wolves running beneath twin moons. Firelight flickered from a massive hearth across the room, casting dancing shadows across carved wooden beams. This was not Ashford. Memory flooded back. The rejection, the forest, the crash. Kaelin. Elwyn sat up too quickly, her head spinning. Before she could throw off the covers, a voice stopped her. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. She turned toward the source, a chair beside the fire, positioned so that its occupant had a clear view of the bed. Of her. Kaelin sat there like a king on his throne, one leg crossed over the other, amber eyes gleaming in the firelight. He'd changed from his rain-soaked clothes into a simple black tunic that did nothing to diminish his presence. If anything, it emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the controlled power in his frame. Where am I? Elwyn asked, her voice rasping. Valdris Keep, my home. Her pulse spiked. You brought me to your castle? I was not about to leave you in the forest. But why? The question she'd been unable to ask before finally escaped. Why did you help me? Why did you threaten war for a stranger? I'm no one. I'm nothing. Something dangerous flickered in Kaelin's expression. Never say that again. Elwyn flinched at the command in his tone. Old habits, beaten into her through years in a pack that treated Omegas as less than. Kaelin's jaw tightened, and she saw him deliberately soften his posture, Forgive me. I did not mean to frighten you. He rose from the chair, moving toward her slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. But I will not tolerate you speaking of yourself as nothing. Not in my presence, not ever. I don't understand, she whispered. He stopped at the foot of the bed, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. Neither do I, he admitted. When you crashed into me, something shifted. My wolf recognized you, called out for you in a way I've never experienced. Eloin's lungs seized. That's impossible. Is it? I'm a rejected Omega. My wolf is barely there. I can't be anyone's mate. The word hung unspoken between them. Your wolf is not gone, Kaelin said quietly. I can feel her. Wounded, yes. Suppressed, but alive. He held her gaze with devastating intensity, and calling to mine. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Kaelin's expression shuddered immediately. Enter. A tall male with silver-streaked temples stepped inside, bowing slightly. Your Majesty, the council has heard rumors of the female. They're requesting an audience. Kaelin's response was cold. They can wait. Sire, they're concerned about... I said they can wait. Tauren. The male Tauren hesitated, his gaze flicking to Eloin with barely concealed curiosity before bowing again. As you command. When the door closed, Eloin forced herself to speak. I should go. I've already caused you too much trouble. You're not leaving. Your council clearly doesn't want me here. My council serves at my pleasure. Kaelin's tone brooked no argument. And I want you here. Eloin shook her head, frustration and confusion warring in her chest. You don't even know me. Then I will learn. Why? Why do you care what happens to a rejected Omega from a minor pack? Kaelin was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that made the ground shift beneath her feet. Because the moment I touched you, my wolf swore a vow I cannot break. You are under my protection now, Eloin, and I protect what is mine. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted somewhere deep within the castle. Shouts, the clash of metal, a howl of alarm that echoed through the stone corridors. Kaelin's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid. Stay here, he commanded. Do not leave this room. And then he was gone, moving with a speed that no ordinary wolf should possess. Eloin sat frozen in the enormous bed, heart pounding, his final word echoing in her mind. Mine. What had she stumbled into? The sounds of chaos faded as quickly as they'd begun. Within minutes, an eerie silence settled over the castle, broken only by the crackling fire and the hammer of Eloin's own heartbeat. She should stay. Kaelin had commanded her to stay, and every survival instinct she'd developed in Ashford told her to obey. To be small, to be invisible, to wait for someone more powerful to decide her fate. But something else stirred beneath the fear, something that felt almost like defiance. You are under my protection now. I protect what is mine. No one had ever protected her. Not her mother, who'd died bringing her into the world. Not her father, who'd resented her for it. Not Aldrich, who'd strung her along with false promises before casting her aside like garbage. Why would this Alpha King be any different? Eloin pushed back the furs and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Someone had changed her out of her ruined dress. She tried not to think too hard about that, and dressed her in a soft white shift that fell past her knees. Her feet were bare, her hair loose around her shoulders, still carrying the faint scent of rain. She padded to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. Slowly, carefully, she eased the door open. The corridor beyond was empty. Stone walls lined with torches stretched in both directions, the flickering light casting long shadows. She had no idea which way led out of the castle, but anywhere was better than sitting helplessly, waiting for her fate to be decided by strangers. Eloin slipped into the corridor and began to walk. Valdris Keep was massive, far larger than any structure in Ashford territory. She passed towering windows that looked out over moonlit mountains, tapestries older than her pack's entire history, doors carved with intricate wolf motifs. Everything spoke of ancient power, of a lineage that stretched back centuries. And somewhere in this labyrinth, a commotion had just occurred. A commotion Kaelin had rushed toward without hesitation. She rounded a corner and stopped dead. A body lay crumpled against the wall. Eloin's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. The male was dressed in Valdris colors, a guard, she realized. And he wasn't dead. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and she could see a wound on his shoulder, still bleeding sluggishly. Everything in her screamed to run. But something else, something deeper, older, more fundamental, pulled her forward instead. Omega, her wolf whispered. It was the first clear communication she'd felt since her rejection, and the word carried weight, purpose. Heal. Eloin knelt beside the wounded guard. Her hands trembled as she reached toward his shoulder, and she had no idea what she was doing, had never been trained, had always been told her wolf was too weak for any meaningful abilities. But when her fingers touched the torn flesh, warmth flooded through her. It started in her chest, a gentle heat that spread down her arms and into her palms. The sensation was foreign and familiar all at once, like remembering a song she'd heard in the womb. Light began to emanate from her hands, soft and golden, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The guard's wound began to close. Eowyn watched in disbelief as skin knitted back together beneath her glowing fingers. The bleeding stopped. The torn muscle mended. Within moments, what had been a potentially fatal injury was nothing but a fading scar. What is? Before she could finish the thought, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Eowyn looked up to see Kaelin rounding the corner, flanked by Torin and 2 other males. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, no one moved. Kaelin's amber eyes were fixed on her hands, still glowing faintly, still pressed to the now-healed guard's shoulder. "What is this?" Torin breathed. Kaelin said nothing, but his expression, that carefully controlled mask, had cracked. Eowyn saw shock there, wonder, and something else she couldn't name. She pulled her hands back as if burned. The light faded. "I didn't mean to," she started. "I don't know how." "He was dying." Kaelin's voice was rough. "That wound should have killed him within minutes." "I don't understand what happened." Eowyn's own voice shook. "I've never done anything like this before." Kaelin crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He dropped to one knee before her, the Alpha King, kneeling before a rejected Omega, and took her trembling hands in his. "Your hands are still warm," he said quietly. "I don't know what I am." "I do." His gaze met hers with devastating intensity. "You're a healer. A true healer. They're born once in a generation, if that. I thought the bloodlines had died out centuries ago." Eowyn shook her head. "That's impossible. I'm just an Omega. I'm nothing." "Stop saying that." The command was soft this time, almost tender. "You are not nothing. You never were." Behind him, Torin cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if word spreads that a healer has emerged." "It won't." Kaelin rose, pulling Eowyn gently to her feet. "Not until we understand what this means. Not until she's ready. The Council will not hear of this." Kaelin's tone left no room for argument. "Anyone who speaks of what they've witnessed tonight will answer to me personally." The other males bowed their heads in submission. Kaelin turned back to Eowyn, and the hardness in his expression softened. "You need rest. We'll discuss this in the morning. I can't just—" "You can." He took her hand again, a simple gesture that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "And you will. Let me care for you, Eowyn. Just for tonight. Can you do that?" She should refuse, should run, should do anything except stand here letting a stranger's touch unravel every wall she'd built around her heart. Instead, she nodded. Kaelin led her back through the corridors, her hand still clasped in his, and when they reached her chamber, he paused at the threshold, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on her palm. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will find answers together. But tonight, know this. Whatever power lives inside you, it is a gift, not a curse, not a danger. A gift." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, achingly tender, unbearably intimate. "Sleep well, little Omega." The door closed behind him, and Eowyn stood trembling in the firelight, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched. She had survived rejection. She had discovered a power she never knew she possessed. And she had found herself in the care of an Alpha King whose every glance made her wolf want to sing. But as she climbed into bed and closed her eyes, another thought crept in, dark and unwelcome. If word spread that a healer had emerged in Valdris, every pack in the realm would want her, and some would kill to possess her. 3 days passed in a blur of wonder and unease. Eowyn had been given a chamber adjoining the king's own quarters, a fact that set the castle ablaze with whispers. Servants brought meals on silver trays. Seamstresses measured her for gowns finer than any she'd imagined. A kind-eyed healer named Irelys visited each morning to check on her recovery. But it was Kaelin who consumed her thoughts. He came to her each evening as the sun dipped below the mountains. Sometimes they talked careful conversations where she revealed fragments of her past and he shared glimpses of the burden of kingship. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence before the fire, her reading from the castle's vast library, him reviewing documents and correspondence. And sometimes, he looked at her in a way that made her forget to breathe. "You're staring again," she said on the 3rd evening, not looking up from her book. "Am I?" "You know you are. Perhaps I find the view worthwhile." Eowyn's cheeks warmed. She'd never known how to handle compliments. Ashford wolves didn't waste pretty words on Omegas, and Kaelin's direct appreciation left her constantly off balance. "Tell me something," she said, finally meeting his gaze. "Why hasn't your council confronted you yet?" "About me," Kaelin's expression flickered. "They have, repeatedly, and I've made my position clear, which is that you remain under my protection until you choose otherwise." Elowen set down her book. "They must hate that. A king protecting a pack less Omega. It goes against every tradition. Traditions can be wrong. Easy for a king to say." Something shifted in Kaelin's eyes, a flash of old pain quickly buried. "Nothing about being king is easy, Elowen, but some choices are simple, regardless of difficulty." He leaned forward, forearms braced on his knees. "You are not a political calculation. You are not a burden to be weighed against benefit. You are a person deserving of safety and care. My council will accept that, or they will find themselves replaced." The conviction in his voice stole her breath. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough." "What could you possibly know after 3 days?" Kaelin held her gaze. "I know you cry in your sleep. I know you flinch when males raise their voices, even in laughter. I know you eat as though expecting your food to be taken away, and apologize for existing at least 10 times a day." Elowen's chest tightened painfully. "I know," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "that someone taught you to believe you were worthless. And I know that belief is a lie. Kaelin, I know that when you healed my guard, you didn't hesitate, didn't calculate. You simply gave, without any thought for yourself." He rose from his chair, crossed to where she sat, and knelt before her just as he had in the corridor. "And I know that my wolf has chosen you. Whether you accept that or not, whether you ever return the feeling or not, you are his, and therefore, you are under my protection for as long as you want it." Tears burned behind Elowen's eyes. "I don't know how to want things for myself. I've never been allowed." "Then learn. Here, in Valdris, you are allowed everything." His hand rose to cup her cheek slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his thumb traced the path of an escaped tear. "You're allowed to be angry," he murmured. "Allowed to grieve, allowed to heal." Elowen's breath shuddered. His touch was impossibly gentle, his skin warm against her cold cheek. "And if I never heal?" she whispered. "If I'm too broken, then I will sit with you in your brokenness, for as long as it takes." Something cracked open in Elowen's chest, a wall she'd built so high and so thick that she'd forgotten it existed. And behind that wall, buried for years beneath survival and suppression, her wolf howled, not in pain this time, in recognition. "Mate." The word reverberated through her entire being. Her wolf surged forward with sudden strength, reaching toward Kaelin's, and she actually felt the moment their spirits touched. Kaelin's eyes widened. His hand trembled against her cheek. "You feel it," he breathed. "Yes." The word came out broken. "Yes, I feel it." For one perfect, suspended moment, the world held its breath. Kaelin leaned closer. Elowen's eyes fluttered closed. She could feel his breath on her lips, could sense his wolf pressing against hers through the forming bond. The door burst open. Kaelin was on his feet instantly, placing himself between Elowen and the intruder. A snarl rippled through his chest. Torin stood in the doorway, face pale with urgency. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but we've received word from Ashford. Whatever it is can wait." "No, sire. It cannot." Torin's gaze flicked to Elowen with something like pity. "Alpha Aldrich has declared war. He's claiming the king kidnapped his rightful property and is demanding her return." He paused. "And he's allied with the southern packs. They march on Valdris within the week." The warmth that had been building between them shattered. Dread pooled in Elowen's stomach. Aldrich, the man who'd rejected her, humiliated her, and called her defective and worthless. Now he was starting a war to drag her back, not because he wanted her, but because he'd learned what she was. "He knows," she whispered. "About my healing. He must know." Kaelin's jaw was granite. "Then we have a traitor in Valdris. Sire, find them." The Alpha King's voice was deadly calm. "Find whoever sold this information, and bring them to me." Torin bowed and vanished. Kaelin turned back to Elowen, and she saw the war already raging behind his eyes, the king calculating strategy, the wolf burning with protective fury. "I should go," she said, the words ash in her mouth. "If I leave, if I give myself up." "No. People will die, Kaelin. Your people. For me." He crossed back to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders with fierce gentleness. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "I will burn every pack in the realm to the ground before I let them take you. You are not currency to be traded. You are not property to be claimed. You are mine, and I will protect you with every breath in my body. But There is no but. There is only this. Do you trust me? Eowyn looked into his amber eyes, those eyes that had seen her at her lowest and called her worthy anyway, and felt her answer rise from somewhere deep and true. Yes, she whispered. I trust you. Then trust me to handle this. Trust me to keep you safe. His forehead pressed against hers. And trust that when this is over, when the threat is gone and the dust settles, I will finish what we started tonight. Her heart stuttered. What we started? His lips brushed against her forehead, tender, achingly restrained. Everything. Then he was gone, striding from the chamber with the focused intensity of a wolf preparing for battle. And Eowyn was left alone with the firelight, her racing heart, and the terrifying realization that she had fallen completely, irrevocably, for the Alpha King. A king who was now preparing for war. Because of her, the next 5 days blurred into a storm of preparation. Valdres Keep transformed from a peaceful stronghold into a fortress bristling with purpose. Soldiers drilled in the courtyards from dawn until dark. Blacksmiths worked through the night, the ring of hammer on steel echoing off stone walls. Messengers arrived and departed at all hours, carrying intelligence about the approaching army. Eowyn watched it all with growing dread. She'd tried to make herself useful, helping Airleys tend to injured soldiers, assisting in the kitchens, doing anything to feel less like the burden she knew herself to be. But everywhere she went, eyes followed her, some curious, some resentful, all aware that she was the reason their king was preparing for war. You shouldn't be down here. Eowyn turned to find Kaelin standing in the doorway of the infirmary, still dressed in his battle leathers from morning training. Sweat gleamed on his brow, and his amber eyes held the weight of 1,000 decisions. I'm helping, she said. You're exhausting yourself. He crossed to where she stood beside a wounded scout's cot. Airleys told me you healed 6 soldiers today. Your hands were shaking by the 3rd. They needed. What I need is for you to be strong when the battle comes. His voice softened. Your gift is precious, Eowyn, but so is your life. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. Before she could argue, Torrin appeared in the doorway. His expression made cold sweep through her. Your Majesty, a messenger from Ashford, under flag of parley. Kaelin's jaw tightened. Where? The Great Hall. He insists on delivering his message personally. To both of you. Eowyn's heart seized. Me? Alpha Aldrich was specific. Kaelin's hand found hers, squeezing once in reassurance. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, stay behind me. The Great Hall was packed with Valdres wolves, all watching as Kaelin led Eowyn toward the raised dais where his throne sat. She kept her spine straight through sheer force of will, refusing to cower before the crowd's scrutiny. The messenger stood at the hall's center, a wiry male with cruel eyes and a sneer that made Eowyn's skin crawl. She recognized him. Fenwick, one of Aldrich's lieutenants. He'd been there the night of her rejection, laughing loudest as she'd fled. Speak, Kaelin commanded, taking his seat on the throne. He didn't offer Eowyn a chair. Instead, he pulled her to stand beside him, his hand resting possessively on her hip. A statement. A claim. Fenwick's sneer widened. Alpha Aldrich of Ashford sends greetings to His Majesty. He wishes to propose a compromise. I'm listening. Return the Omega female, and the Allied forces will withdraw. No blood need be shed. No wolves need die. Fenwick's gaze slid to Eowyn. She belongs to Ashford. She was promised to our Alpha heir. Her rejection was a formality. She remains pack property by law. Murmurs rippled through the hall. She was rejected, Kaelin said coldly. By your own traditions, that severs all claims. Traditions can be reinterpreted. Fenwick smiled. Especially when the property in question turns out to be more valuable than initially assessed. Property. The word struck like a blow. My answer is no. Fenwick's smile didn't waver. Then Alpha Aldrich asked me to deliver a second message, one for the Omega specifically. Before anyone could react, he reached into his cloak and hurled something toward the dais. It clattered across the stone floor, rolling to a stop at Eowyn's feet. A ring. Small, silver, set with a pale blue stone. Her mother's ring. The ring her father had kept locked away since her mother's death. The only thing Eowyn had ever wanted from her family, and had been denied. A gift, Fenwick said, to remind you where you come from, and what will happen to everyone you left behind if you don't return. Fear lanced through her. What have you done? Nothing yet, but the servants who sheltered you as a child. The elderly Omega who used to sneak you extra food. They're quite comfortable in our dungeons. For now. You're lying. Am I? Fenwick's eyes glittered. Surrender yourself at the eastern border by tomorrow's sunset. Come alone, or their blood will be on your hands. Kaelin rose from his throne, power radiating from him in waves that made lesser wolves step back. "Get out. I've delivered my message." Fenwick bowed mockingly. "The choice is hers, Your Majesty. How many innocent lives is she willing to sacrifice for her own freedom?" 2 guards escorted him from the hall, but his words lingered like poison. Elowen stared at the ring in her trembling hands. People who had shown her kindness, the only kindness she'd known in Ashford, were suffering because of her. "I have to go," she whispered. Kaelin's hands gripped her shoulders, turning her to face him. "No, they'll die. And you'll die if you surrender. You know what Aldrich wants you for? Your gift. He'll drain you dry and discard whatever's left. But those people might already be dead, might never have existed. This could be manipulation. And if it's not..." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "How do I live with myself if innocent people die because I was too afraid?" Kaelin pulled her against his chest, wrapping her in his arms as though he could shield her from the weight of impossible choices. "We will find another way," he murmured against her hair. "I swear to you, Elowen, I will not let them take you, and I will not let innocents suffer. But I need you to trust me. One more day. Give me one more day to find a solution." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that somehow he could make this right. But as she clung to him in the silent hall, her mother's ring clutched in her fist, Elowen couldn't shake the terrible feeling that no solution existed, that by sunrise, she would have to make a choice that destroyed her either way. Elowen didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching the moon trace its path across the sky, counting the hours until Aldrich's deadline. Her mother's ring hung on a chain around her neck now, pressing cold against her chest like a reminder of everything she stood to lose. She was going to surrender. She'd decided hours ago, though she hadn't told Kaelin, couldn't tell him, because he would stop her. But she would not let innocents die for her sake. Not when she could prevent it. Just before dawn, she slipped from her chamber with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's ring. The castle was quiet, most wolves exhausted from war preparations. She moved through shadowed corridors, heading toward a servant's passage Airleys had mentioned days ago. She almost made it. Going somewhere? Elowen froze. An elderly female stepped from the shadows, someone she'd never seen before. White hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes were milky with age, yet they seemed to see straight through to Elowen's soul. "I have to go," Elowen whispered. "Yes, but not where you think." The old female moved closer, her steps steady despite her apparent frailty. "You are the one, aren't you? The healer who carries moonfire in her veins." "I don't know what that means." "No, you wouldn't. They kept you ignorant, kept you small." The female's wrinkled hand reached out to touch the ring at Elowen's throat. "This belonged to Lysera. I would recognize it anywhere." Elowen's heart stopped. "You knew my mother? Knew her?" A sad smile crossed the ancient face. "Child, I delivered her into this world, just as I delivered her mother before her. Your bloodline has been known to me for 3 generations. I don't understand. Come with me. There are things you must know before you throw your life away." Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Elowen followed. The old female led her deep into the castle, downstairs Elowen hadn't known existed, into a chamber carved from the mountain itself. Torches flickered to life as they entered, illuminating walls covered in ancient paintings, wolves running beneath strange stars, females with glowing hands, symbols that seemed to shimmer and move. What is this place? The Chamber of Origins, where the first wolves made their covenant with the moon. The female settled onto a stone bench, gesturing for Elowen to sit beside her. "My name is Morvenna. I am the last keeper of the old knowledge. And you, child, are the last heir of the Luminara bloodline." Elowen shook her head. "I'm an Omega from a minor pack. My mother was nobody. Your mother was the daughter of the most powerful healer in 1,000 years. A healer who was hunted, persecuted, forced into hiding. She took refuge in Ashford, concealed her gift, and died bringing you into the world, but not before she passed every drop of her power into your blood." The words crashed over Elowen like waves. Her mother, powerful, a healer. Why wouldn't anyone tell me? "Because knowledge is danger." Morvenna's milky eyes grew sorrowful. "Your grandmother made enemies, powerful wolves who feared what healers could do. When she died, those enemies turned their attention to your mother, and when your mother died, they assumed the bloodline was extinct. But I'm alive. Yes, hidden in plain sight. An Omega so suppressed that no one sensed what lay dormant within you." Morvenna leaned closer. "Until you met your mate. Until his touch awakened what was sleeping." Elowen's breath caught. "Kaelin, the Alpha King's bloodline is ancient too. Pure. When your spirits touched, it ignited your healing gift, but that is only the beginning." Morvenna took Elowen's hands, turning them palm up. You are not merely a healer, child. Healers mend flesh. Moonkeepers wield the goddess's own power. You can heal, yes, but you can also destroy, create, bind, break. The power in your blood is limitless if you learn to wield it. Elowen stared at her palms as though seeing them for the first time. Why are you telling me this now? Because if you surrender to Aldrich, everything your mother and grandmother sacrificed will be for nothing. Morvenna's grip tightened. He knows what you are. Not fully, not yet, but he knows enough to want your power. He will breed you to his heirs, trying to create weapons. He will bleed you dry to fuel dark magics. He will never let you go. Nausea rolled through Elowen's stomach. The people he's holding are already dead. The words struck like physical blows. I'm sorry, child. Aldrich never intended to trade. He simply needed to lure you out. His wolves wait at the eastern border not to receive you, but to ambush you before you can reach Valdris protection again. Elowen's vision blurred with tears. All along, she'd been preparing to sacrifice herself for people who were already gone. All along, Aldrich had been playing a game she didn't even know existed. What do I do? She whispered. I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to use this power. You are a moonkeeper. Morvenna rose, pulling Elowen up with her. And it is time you learned what that means. For the next hour, the old keeper taught her. Not battle magic, there wasn't time, but something more fundamental. How to sense the power within her. How to draw it up deliberately instead of accidentally. How to feel the threads of life connecting all living things. And when the lesson ended, Morvenna placed something in her hands. A small vial filled with silver liquid that seemed to glow from within. Moon's tear, the keeper said. Your grandmother gathered it. Your mother kept it hidden. And now it passes to you. What does it do? In the right hands? It can amplify a moonkeeper's power 1,000-fold. Morvenna's eyes grew grave. In the wrong hands, it could level mountains. Use it only when all hope is lost, only when nothing else will suffice. Elowen tucked the vial into her bodice, feeling its warmth against her heart. Now go, Morvenna said. Find your king. Tell him what you've learned, and prepare for what is coming because Aldrich is not your only enemy. What do you mean? But the old female was already fading, her form growing translucent, dissolving into the torchlight like mist before dawn. The shadows are rising, Moonkeeper. The wolf who hunted your grandmother still lives, and he has found you at last. Then she was gone. Elowen stood alone in the ancient chamber, clutching her mother's ring with one hand and the moon's tear with the other. Everything she'd believed about herself was a lie. And somewhere out there, an enemy she'd never known existed was coming for her blood. Elowen burst from the hidden stairway into the castle's main corridor and ran directly into Kalen. His arms caught her automatically, but his face was a thundercloud. Behind him stood Torin and a dozen guards, all clearly in the midst of a search. Where have you been? Kalen demanded. I went to your chamber at dawn. You were gone. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought you'd surrendered yourself. I almost did. Elowen gripped his forearms, steadying herself. But Kalen, I learned something. Everything about my past, my mother, my power, it's all connected. There's so much I need to tell you. Something in her tone cut through his anger. He waved the guards away and guided her quickly toward his private study, closing the door behind them. Elowen told him everything. Morvenna, the Luminara bloodline, the Moonkeeper power, the grandmother who'd been hunted, and the mother who'd died protecting her secret. She showed him the moon's tear, watched his eyes widen at the silver glow, and she told him about the enemy Morvenna had warned of, the wolf who had hunted her grandmother and was now coming for her. When she finished, Kalen was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I won't let them take you, he said against her hair. Any of them. Aldrich, this shadow from your past, whoever comes. I know. She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his scent, cedar and pine and something wild that made her wolf purr. But we don't even know who this enemy is. Morvenna disappeared before she could tell me. Then we find out. Kalen pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. Together. But first the battle. Aldrich's forces will reach our borders by nightfall. Nightfall. Hours away. And an entire war awaited. What do you need from me? Elowen asked. Stay in the castle. Stay protected. Your gift is too valuable to risk on the front lines. I can heal the wounded. After. When the fighting is done. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones. Please, Elowen. I cannot focus on battle if I'm terrified for your safety. Give me peace of mind. Stay where I know you're guarded. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, but she saw the fear beneath his authority, the mate's terror of losing the one person his wolf had claimed. I'll stay, she promised. Relief flooded his features. He kissed her forehead, lingering, breathing her in. "When this is over," he murmured, "we will complete what we started. The bond, the claiming, everything. Is that a promise?" "It is a vow." One final embrace, one final moment of warmth, and then he was gone, striding from the study with the focused intensity of a king preparing to defend his kingdom. Elowen watched him go with her heart in her throat. The battle began at dusk. From her chamber's high window, Elowen watched the distant tree line explode with movement. Wolves in their shifted forms poured from the forest, hundreds of them clashing against the Valdris defenders in a chaos of fur and fang. She couldn't tell who was winning, could only watch the distant shapes writhing in combat, illuminated by the dying sun. "Please," she prayed, to whatever gods might listen, "please let him survive." Hours passed. The moon rose. The sounds of battle grew distant, then closer, then distant again. Elowen paced her chamber like a caged animal, her wolf clawing beneath her skin with desperate need to find her mate. Then the door burst open. Torin stood in the threshold, blood streaking his face, armor dented and torn. "My lady, you must come, now." Cold swept through her. "What happened?" "The king," Torin's voice broke. "The king has fallen." The world stopped. "No." The word was barely audible. "No, that's not possible. A poisoned blade. We don't know how it got past his guard." Torin grabbed her arm, pulling her into the corridor. "He's asking for you. Only you." Elowen ran. She ran through corridors slick with blood, past wounded soldiers crying out for aid, downstairs she'd never taken, until she burst into a chamber that stank of death. And there, on a table surrounded by Valdris healers, lay Cailan. His armor had been removed, revealing a wound in his side that wept black ichor. The veins around the injury pulsed with darkness, silver-black corruption creeping across his skin like frost on glass. "Elowen." His voice was a rasp, barely human. "You came." She shoved past the healers, falling to her knees beside the table. Her hands found his face burning hot, slick with fever sweat. I'm here, Cailan." The poison. His amber eyes, dimmed with pain, fought to focus on her. "It's not natural. It's meant for our kind. For true mates." "What do you mean?" "If I die." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "The bond will drag you with me. Whoever did this, they wanted to kill us both." Horror gripped her. The incomplete bond. The connection their wolves had forged. If he died, she died. But worse than that, far worse, was the thought of a world without him in it. "Tell me how to stop it," she begged. "There has to be a way." Moon's tear. One of the healers spoke up, an ancient male with knowing eyes. "The old legends speak of it. But even if you have it, using it on this poison." "What? What happens?" The healer's face was grim. "The power required to purge this darkness would likely kill you both. The poison was designed specifically to counter Moonkeeper healing. Using Moon's tear against it is suicide." Elowen's hand closed around the vial hidden in her bodice. "Use it only when all hope is lost." She looked at Cailan, her mate, her king, the only person who had ever seen her as worthy, and watched the darkness creep further across his skin. All hope was lost, and she knew exactly what she had to do. "Leave us," she commanded. The healers hesitated. "Leave us, now." They fled. Alone with her dying mate, Elowen uncorked the vial of Moon's tear. The silver liquid glowed like captured moonlight, warm and alive in her palm. "Elowen, no." Cailan's hand caught her wrist weakly. "I won't let you die for me. You don't have a choice." Tears streamed down her face. "And neither do I. Because I love you, Cailan. I love you, and I am not going to watch you die." His eyes widened. "You love me? More than my own life." She lifted the vial to her lips. "And now I'm going to prove it." "Elowen." She drank. The moon's tear burned down Elowen's throat like liquid starfire. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then power, raw, ancient, overwhelming, exploded through her veins. She gasped, her back arching, her hands flying out as light erupted from every pore of her skin. Not the soft gold of her natural healing gift, but blazing silver, the moonfire of her ancestors, amplified 1,000-fold. It was agony. It was ecstasy. It was being unmade and reforged in the same breath. "Too much," some distant part of her screamed. "It's too much. You can't contain it." But then she felt him. Cailan, the thread of their incomplete bond, fragile as spider silk, pulsing with his fading heartbeat. And suddenly the power had a purpose, a direction, a reason. Elowen slammed her glowing hands down on Cailan's chest. The silver light poured from her into him, flooding through the bond like a river breaking through a dam. She felt the poison recoil, felt it fight her. A living darkness that clawed and bit and screamed in defiance. But she was stronger. The moon's tear had made her stronger. You will not have him. She poured everything she had into the healing. Every scrap of power, every ounce of love, every moment of loneliness and rejection and pain, transmuted into pure, blazing light. The darkness shrieked a sound that existed beyond hearing, in the space between souls, and then it shattered. Elowyn watched the silver-black veins recede from Kaelin's skin, watched the wound in his side close and heal, watched color flood back into his ashen face. His heartbeat strengthened beneath her palms, steady and sure. He was going to live. The realization hit her just as her strength gave out. The silver light flickered, dimmed, and died. Elowyn collapsed across Kaelin's chest, utterly spent, darkness rushing up to claim her. But before unconsciousness took her, she felt his arms wrap around her, and she heard his voice, broken with emotion, whispering against her hair, "My brave, foolish, magnificent mate." Elowyn drifted in a sea of silver light. She wasn't afraid. The light was warm, welcoming, and familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Somewhere in the distance, she heard voices her mother's, her grandmother's, generations of Luminara women stretching back through centuries. "Well done, daughter. The bloodline continues. Wake now. He's waiting for you." She wanted to stay. Wanted to float in this peaceful place forever. But the pull of the waking world was too strong, and the bond, now blazing like a bonfire in her chest, demanded her return. Elowyn opened her eyes. She was in Kaelin's chamber, lying in his massive bed, wrapped in furs softer than clouds. Dawnlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. And Kaelin sat beside her, his amber eyes fixed on her face with such intensity that her breath caught. "You're awake." His voice was rough, as though he'd been talking for hours or crying. "You're alive." The words came out as a croak. "Thanks to you." He reached out, brushing hair from her face with trembling fingers. "You beautiful, reckless, impossible woman. You nearly killed yourself. Worth it." Something shattered in his expression, the careful control he always maintained crumbling into raw, naked emotion. 3 days, he said hoarsely. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Airlies didn't know if you'd ever wake. I sat here every hour, watching you breathe, bargaining with every god I could name." Elowyn lifted her hand to his cheek, cutting off his words. "I'm here now." Kaelin turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss to her skin. When he looked at her again, his eyes were wet. "The battle? Won." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "When the soldiers saw me rise from what should have been a deathbed, they fought like wolves possessed. Aldrich's forces broke by midnight. He fled with what remained of his army. And the shadow enemy, the one Morvenna warned about?" Kaelin's expression darkened. "We captured a wolf trying to flee the battlefield." Under questioning, he revealed who sent the poisoned blade. He paused. "A male named Kael, an ancient wolf who was believed dead centuries ago. He's the one who hunted your grandmother, the one who has waited all this time for the Luminara bloodline to resurface." A chill ran down her spine. "He's still out there, for now, but he lost his chance. You're too powerful now, Elowyn. With the moon's tear fully bonded to your blood, you're beyond his reach." Kaelin's hand covered hers on his cheek. "And you have me. You have all of Valdris. He will never touch you." She wanted to believe him, and looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute conviction there, she found that she did. "There's something else," Kaelin said quietly. "What?" "While you were unconscious, your wolf spoke to mine. Through the bond." He swallowed hard. "She told me everything. Your childhood, the abuse, the rejection, every moment of pain you've ever endured." Elowyn's chest constricted. "Kaelin, let me finish." His voice was thick with controlled emotion. "I felt it all. Lived it alongside you. And I need you to understand something." He shifted, moving closer, taking both her hands in his. "Every wolf who ever made you feel small was wrong. Every voice that told you you were worthless was lying. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You walked through fire and came out forged in steel. And I am honored beyond words that your wolf chose mine." Tears spilled down Elowyn's cheeks. No one had ever said such things to her. No one had ever looked at her the way Kaelin was looking at her now, like she was precious beyond measure. "I love you," she whispered. "I know." His forehead pressed against hers. "You told me, right before you drank poison to save my life." A watery laugh escaped her. "I have no regrets. I have one." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I never got to claim you properly. Never got to finish the bond we started. Elowen's pulse quickened. We could fix that. Kaelin pulled back, searching her face. Are you certain? After everything you've been through? I have never been more certain of anything. She sat up, ignoring the residual weakness in her limbs, and cupped his face in both hands. You are my mate, Kaelin. My heart recognized you the moment I crashed into you in that forest. And I am done waiting. I am done being afraid. I want this. I want you. Something wild and primal blazed in his eyes. Then you shall have me. He kissed her. Not the gentle, restrained kisses they'd shared before. This was claiming possession, a promise sealed in fire. His hands cradled her face, her waist, her back everywhere at once, and she melted into him like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Because she had. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Kaelin's gaze dropped to her throat. The claiming bite. He breathed. Are you ready? Elowen tilted her head back, baring her neck in the ancient gesture of surrender and trust. I've been ready since the moment I met you. Kaelin growled a sound that rumbled through her bones and made her wolf howl with joy. He lowered his mouth to the curve of her neck, kissing the sensitive skin there, letting her feel the graze of his teeth. This will hurt, he murmured. I don't care. His teeth pierced her flesh. Pain lanced through her sharp, bright, exquisite. But beneath the pain was something else, something that felt like coming home. The bond between them, already strong, exploded into completion. She felt him not just his presence, but his soul, his love, his devotion, his absolute certainty that she was his, and he was hers, forever. Tears streamed down her face as the claiming took hold. When Kaelin finally lifted his head, his lips stained with her blood, his eyes glowing pure gold, she saw her own wonder reflected back at her. Mate, he breathed. Mate? She echoed, and then she pulled him down and claimed him right back. The days that followed blurred into something Elowen had never experienced before. Happiness. True, complete, bone-deep happiness. She trained with Morvenna, who had returned as mysteriously as she'd vanished, learning to control her Moonkeeper abilities. She healed wounded soldiers and sick villagers, finally using her gift openly, without fear. She attended council meetings at Kaelin's side, no longer a rejected Omega but the Alpha Queen of Valdris. And every night, she fell asleep in her mate's arms, their bond humming with contentment, their wolves curled together in perfect peace. One evening, as they stood on the castle balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Kaelin pulled her back against his chest and pressed his lips to the claiming mark on her neck. Any regrets? He murmured. Elowen smiled, leaning into his warmth. She thought about the girl she'd been broken, rejected, fleeing through a forest in a torn dress. The girl who'd believed she was nothing, worth nothing, destined for nothing. That girl felt like a stranger now. None, she said softly. Not a single one. Kaelin's arms tightened around her. Good, because I plan to spend the rest of our very long lives making sure it stays that way. She turned in his embrace, rising on her toes to kiss him. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the Valdris sky, Elowen finally understood what she'd been searching for all along. Not just safety, not just acceptance, not just love, home. She had found her home, and she was never letting it go. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like to hear more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me. Until next time.